Welcome to the Steel City Spiral Podcast. My name is Nick Berlansky. I'm here with Nick Poprocky, and we're here to talk about the first 4 weeks. That is the first 25% of the NFL season. It is October. The first month is over, which means a couple things. One, all the NFL players are going to be wearing their pink gear for the next month. And two, there's going to be idiots like us that are just going to be speculating how the rest of the season is going to look based on the minimal things that we've seen so far. So let's go down through the big storylines for a couple of the weeks, just some things that we want to quickly talk about before we get into each specific division and each specific team. Week 1, we had the Patriots losing in Foxborough. I know I was watching the game with you. I couldn't believe they lost in Foxborough, but now we look at it, and now they've lost 2 games at home already this year. They're 1-2. I was watching it. Obviously, you have to highlight how good Kareem Hunt played in his first game. He fumbled on his first carry, but he finished with 148 rush yards and a touchdown, and 98 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. I know I was surprised. I know we have a friend named Dom that he wasn't very surprised. I just want a couple of your thoughts on what you've seen from Kareem Hunt so far in his career.
Right, Nick, and it's a pleasure to be here, always. And I was just as surprised as you were watching that game. I thought the most notable thing about the Kansas City side of the game was how well they were able to move the ball in big chunks. I believe 3 touchdowns of over 50 yards, or at least big plays through the air. One of them was to Hill and a couple to Hunt. That's something they struggle with. They were in the lower third offensively last year as far as production and yardage. A lot of people thinking Patrick Mahomes is the new guy. Alex Smith's on his way out, but Alex Smith has been very efficient and very effective. To me, I was even more surprised at how poorly both the offensive and defensive lines of the Patriots played. There was not a lot of turnover. In fact, the Patriots' defensive line seemingly would have gotten better with adding Cody Ealy, but they really got pushed around. And after the last couple weeks, especially the Week 4 matchup against Carolina, it's definitely concerning for Bill Belichick.
Like you said about Pat Mahomes and Alex Smith, that whole dynamic, it's a dynamic that happens pretty frequently now in the NFL. There's 2 to 3 quarterbacks that get drafted, and the big question is the guy that's in there now a placeholder? Does the guy even have a chance to keep his job? Alex Smith, I'm pretty sure, has earned that chance to keep his spot for the rest of the year. We've seen other teams like down in Houston. Tom Savage didn't even make it through Week 1 before Deshaun Watson took his spot. We saw it last year. Jared Goff took over with 6 games left in the season. Last year, Carson Wentz came in and just won the spot out of the gate. And we saw, as of right now, Mitch Trubisky is taking over next week for Mike Glennon. So it's something that definitely happens in the NFL every year, and it's always interesting to speculate, how long can the guy hold these young guns out? But it's something that's happened more frequently and more frequently. Also in Week 1, we had 8 defensive touchdowns. I don't know. When I was watching it, I thought that was something that maybe this is a new trend in the NFL, because there's trends that pop up everywhere, whether it's returning in the return game, and the NFL tries to keep up with their rule changes. But it's kind of tapered off before then, so not really a big storyline there. The only other big storyline was really Sam Bradford, which kind of sad because he has not played it down since Week 1, but that Week 1 performance on Monday night, he threw for 346 and 3 touchdowns, which was very impressive on his part. But Case Keenum has started ever since, and his Vikings are 2-2 at this point. Week 2, the only other things we got here are Zeke's worst game ever in the NFL. He had 8 rush yards. People were bagging on him for the way he showed effort during a pick or something. They were really getting on his case, but in the end, it was one game. And it was one game, like you said before we started this, against the Broncos, and I know you have a couple words to say about them, so I'll let you go right into that. But I wasn't very upset about this because, it's one game, and it's behind that offensive line, and they were playing a good defense. But I know you wanted to say some things about the Broncos.
Right, and I think before the season, a lot of the sexy picks for the AFC West, people looking at, who's got the best quarterback? Evidently, it's probably Derek Carr in Oakland. Kansas City has already shown that they've got a very high-powered offense. The Chargers, touch and go with them. They're 0-4 as we stand, and they've been in every game they've played. Denver's just one of those teams. I think you look at them on paper, you see that while C.J. Anderson seems to be a pretty B-plus kind of back, Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, seems like the last 18 months nobody's known who really is the starter, but Siemian's played, as far as I would consider him to be a game manager, he's played well. But that team is, I think, better than any other team in the NFL. It's all about defense. And from the moment they lost in the Super Bowl to that vaunted Seattle Seahawks Legion of Boom, that's the way they built their organization.
But the Broncos and that entire division are definitely something that is a huge threat to the rest of the NFL right now. But from going from a huge threat to going to something that is kind of like the Hello Kitty of the NFL right now, the New York Giants, man. Week 2, their offensive line looked god-awful. I get the Detroit's defense. Their defensive line's big. But their defensive line is nothing compared to some of the top tier. They're obviously in the upper half. But they're not top 5, I don't think, defensive lines in the league. And they just made the Giants look horrible. The Giants are 0-4 at this point. I don't know. I can't believe that they're that bad.
The Giants remind me, and this is the Pittsburgh is coming out of me. They remind me of the Steelers team that started off 0-4, I believe, 4 seasons ago. And I believe within that 0-4 start, the Steelers lost at home to the Bears on Sunday night. Jay Cutler, which is never something to be proud of. They lost in I think London against the Vikings. They got ran all over by Adrian Peterson. A lot of the similarities there. You got a defense that's talented, but getting a little bit older. Pass rush has been irrelevant. Offensive line is pathetic. It's probably one of the worst technique-wise offensive lines that you see in football. You see a lot of better offensive line play on Saturdays. Eli Manning is not getting any help. You really can't blame him for the lack of production. And I honestly think that the Odell Beckham Jr. situation where he had the celebration where he looked like a dog urinating on the field against the Eagles in Week 3. I don't see those kinds of celebrations and things like that to be necessary for a team that's, just missing something.
I mean, you're 0-4.
Exactly.
So when you're scoring touchdowns, we get it. You want to celebrate, even if you're doing really bad in the game, even if your team is down by 30. You want to celebrate because it's something to celebrate. But I think once you get to that point and you need to focus on winning games and not, obviously, your celebrations. We have the rule change this year that you can celebrate with teammates. There's a lot more lax, which I thought was necessary because I don't think 15 yards for over-celebrating is good because you get 15 yards for over-celebrating. You can get 15 yards for taking somebody's head off, as we saw in the Thursday night game. That was 15 yards, and last year they would have called the same thing for a third pump or a third twerk on Antonio Brown. So
that's right.
I think it was a good rule change, but I think you need to know when to do it, and that's something that I think McAdoo will probably talk to Odell about, considering his team's 0-4 and they need to do something to turn that ship around.
Being in a market the size of New York, and especially with the expectations the Giants had, if the Giants don't find a way to finish the season 8-4, 9-3, something like that, you could see a lot of people calling for McAdoo's head.
Yeah, and it's sad, though, because this is his second year. They didn't do too poorly last year. They were in a great division. Obviously, the Cowboys had an amazing season last year. The Eagles had only 5 wins, but you could see they were developing with Carson Wentz, and you can see the payoff now there. And Kirk Cousins has been a steady threat in that division for 3 years now. So you can't really blame that on last year. It was the first year in the system. But if you're like you said, it's sad, but they will. They're going to call for his job, especially being in New York. You see the turnstile that is the Jets front office and the Jets coaching and the Jets players. And that's because they're in that same market. And if the Giants can't compete, especially with the higher expectations that they had over where the Jets were in the past 2 decades, then you can definitely see them calling for, I could even see them calling for Eli's job if they haven't already. Week 4, there were just a couple things that I'm going to shoot through real quick. Cam Newton kind of looked like he did in his MVP season when he was up in Foxborough. 316 pass yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. He also had 44 rush yards and a touchdown. Another person we have to talk about is Todd Gurley, who last year had a down year for the Rams, but that entire offense has completely changed. He went into Dallas and ran for 121 yards, also had 94 receiving yards. Sean Watson had 5 touchdowns yesterday, which was ridiculous. He kind of looked like a video game quarterback like we expect him to, like we saw him do in Clemson. Obviously, you being a Pitt fan, you saw that a little bit more than I did being a Penn State fan. But if you want to talk a little bit about what you saw with Deshaun yesterday, if you watched that much of that game.
Well, I think going into that game, I can remember thinking to myself, it's Tennessee versus Houston. This is really where we're going to find out right now who's the class of this division. And I did not expect either team to win by 35. What surprised me about that game was a little bit less about Watson, who obviously he played tremendous, put up a lot of points, was able to move the ball in the air, didn't make a lot of mistakes, barring one really bad interception at the end of the first half. The inability for the Titans to move the ball, the inability for the Titans to hold on to the ball. And yes, of course, Marcus Mariota left the game in the third quarter and didn't come back, but at that point, the game was already out of hand probably in the second quarter. I think right now Houston is the team that looks the most qualified to make the playoffs in the AFC South. And Deshaun Watson seems like one of those guys that maybe he just gets it. The measurables at the draft, at the combine, or maybe the quickness of his ability to get the ball off, they might not have been as favorable as some of the other guys that got drafted ahead of him. But he's just a winner. And it's like you said a few minutes ago, his ability to throw for 500 yards against Alabama proved just as much as Mitchell Trubisky's or whatever got him 10 picks ahead of him. So he's definitely a franchise quarterback, in my opinion.
Well, as we stand here, we are 4 weeks into the season, barring that Monday night game that is tonight. Obviously, we're recording before the Redskins and the Chiefs who are, in my opinion, far and away right now the most impressive team that has played. They are the only undefeated team left, but we are also going to look at the 4 winless teams so far. Not really, other than the Giants, who are 0-4, not really many surprises between the other 3. The Browns, the LA Chargers, and the San Francisco 49ers. None of them really had high expectations coming into the season. None of them were even playoff hopefuls. But still, to go 0-4, especially if you're looking at the Browns, they went 0-14 last year before they got a win. They brought in 3 first-rounders. They brought in defense, offense. They got Deshaun Kaiser, who might be dual threat and might actually give them some offensive threat. He has done all right. I don't think he's done horribly, but at the same time, he's not effective enough to get them wins. They've been blown out. They've been close. If you look at the 49ers also, they've really been close in all their games. They played 3 division games in a row. They've lost by, I think, 3 points against the Seahawks week 2, lost by 2 to the Rams in week 3 on Thursday night, and then on week 4, which was yesterday, obviously, they lost in overtime by a field goal. So they've lost by 3-2-3 against division teams, which is tough. But at the same time, you look at it, you're 0-4, and you really, if you're losing by that much and still have no hope, they need a lot of changes in that front office. I'm not sure really what they can do at this point for the rest of the season that would make it look better than it does right now.
I think the team with the least amount of hope that you just mentioned would be the Los Angeles Chargers. I think that move that they made to go, right down, not necessarily down the street, but closer LA to San Diego than Pittsburgh is to Cleveland. Not a far move. They have the same fan base, although they're struggling to sell tickets, which I believe we'll mention later. And it just seems like one of those teams that they just can't get out of the situation they're in. When they've been competitive with Phillip Rivers, they were never good enough to beat the Patriots in the playoffs. When they've been bad with Phillip Rivers, they've never been good enough to win a couple more division games and make a wild card game. There's something about that organization that needs a lot of turnover, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Phillip Rivers on the last end of his contract in the Chargers organization. I think Cleveland is one of those teams that some people had some high expectations to improve. Theoretically win 3 or 4 games because they don't play the most difficult schedule. They still have Cleveland. And I could be wrong, but I believe they still play San Francisco. And they play the Jets in week 5. They're one of those teams that I think maybe threw Deshaun Kaiser to the Wolves a little bit too soon. When you're asking a guy to throw 37 passes at the age of 21, especially playing from behind most of the game.
Especially with his receiver core.
There's not much
Corey
to
Coleman's
throw
been
to.
hurt. So there's not. I completely agree. You threw him to the Wolves a little early, and it's the conversation we already talked about. Rookie quarterbacks. Should they have a placeholder there until they get to know the system, or should they just be thrown right in? Look at the Browns. They thought, hey, why not? And there's sort of a problem when you do that, because you say, hey, why not? What's the worst that can happen? You could ruin this kid's confidence, and he could never be the same player. You saw him going into the draft. A lot of people forgot about him, the big Notre Dame quarterback. I'm not sure how somebody forgets about the Notre Dame quarterback, but that's a completely different podcast talking about where Notre Dame has gone in their division. But just the fact that he's had to go out there and been given this burden, you saw it happen to Manziel. You saw it happen to McCown when he was a little bit younger. It's just Cleveland's a tough place to be a quarterback.
It is, and you mentioned that they improved the offensive line, signing Zietler from the Cincinnati Bengals and having Joe Thomas, of course. I mean, this is a team that they bet a lot of money on being competitive in the next 3-year window. They salvaged a lot of money on the Brock Osweiler trade so they could get that draft pick that became Deshaun Kaiser. They're a team right now that just because they're young, they are feeling the pressure to improve. And on one side, you can say, well, you can't get much worse than what they did last year. And that's true. But in the same way, they have to be prepared to maybe change some things up. I think as far as coaching is concerned, it's been such a hot seat city. They haven't really kept the same head coach for more than, I don't think, 2 years. So I'm not sure if that's the problem. I'm not sure if the front office is the problem, like you mentioned earlier with the Niners. It's a wait and see kind of game with Cleveland. But it would not surprise me to see them draft another quarterback in the spring.
Yeah, it's definitely been something that there's usually 2 or 3 teams that are looking at quarterbacks, and you look at this next draft class, I don't know if the young gun from USC, which I'm blanking on his name right now.
Sam Darnold.
Darnold. I don't know if he's ready to come up or he will. If there's also other quarterbacks in different places. Oklahoma State's quarterback, Mason Rudolph, is also very touted and looking to come into this next draft class. There's always room for more quarterbacks, it looks like. And it's weird because you look at every year, there's 2 or 3 that people are talking about, oh, he might be the next big thing. And really, after about 2 or 3 years in the NFL, there might be one left. There might not be. You look at the draft class from a couple of years ago. Robert Griffin III is not in the NFL anymore. Johnny Manziel, not in the NFL anymore. Andrew Luck, seems like he's not in the NFL anymore.
Has yet to play since it feels like the middle of last season.
Yeah. So it's definitely, the quarterback situation in the NFL is definitely something that we could talk about for hours. It's honestly one of the most fun things to talk about because from high school to college to the pros, quarterback is showtime. And it's always fun to talk about. So now I kind of want to go through, we're going to go through the divisions. And we're going to talk about individual teams, individual divisions, where we think they're going. I don't know. It's, to me right now, probably the worst division in football.
I would agree. I think that the Steelers have yet to show much more than probably 75% of their potential on offense. Defensively, they look very sharp, but there's a lot of room for improvement there, and they still look far and away like the only playoff team in that division.
Yeah, we're going to go through the standings right now. Pittsburgh Steelers, first place, 3-1. Ravens, sole possession of second at 2-2. Bengals in third at 1-3, and the Browns, as we've talked about them a little bit already, are 0-4. I said it's the worst division in football. I'm going to stand by that as of right now until I've been proven differently. One of the things that we're going to look at, the way I look at it is why it's the worst division. Yes, the Steelers have not been playing to the best of their ability, and they're number 1. Then under that, it's the Ravens who really, I think, have been playing to the best of their ability. And I just think that their ability is not as high as it used to be. And you look at the Bengals who, I mean, in weeks 1 and 2 combined for 9 points, and weeks 3 and 4 combined for 55 points. So you don't know where that offense is going to be. I mean, obviously some of that goes into who they were playing. They played the Browns yesterday and won 31-7. I think, yeah, it's Steelers, Ravens, Bengals. And I think there's still, we've said it so many times, and I know I've said it to you, you said it to me, there's 50 piles of crap. And then there's the Cleveland Browns, which is sad.
It is sad, and I think that game yesterday in Cleveland between the 2 teams that were in the cellar of the division, it really was, it's time to prove, Cleveland, are you still the team that's going to sit way low at the bottom? And unfortunately for the people of Cleveland, and it's just sad to watch, but it's true. They were not even close to a Bengals team that's very disappointing, I think is the best way you could put it.
Yeah. Steelers, obviously, as of right now, are in first place in that division. I think they are the only true threat to make the playoffs even, let alone go to the Super Bowl. But here's the thing. You did talk a little bit about the Steelers' defense, how you said they look good now, but there's a lot of things you need to shore up before you can go up against the Patriots late in the season or against the Chiefs right now. But has their defense looked that good because they are that good, or is it just because of who they're facing? You look at week 1, you're facing the Browns, who we've bashed a lot more than we probably should at this point. They're trying, I guess. They played week 2. They played the Case Keenum-led Vikings, who are still trying to find their footing with a rookie running back and obviously Case Keenum there. And that was the first time he had to start. Week 3, we played Glennon and the Bears, who ran all over them, actually. The pass defense looked great, obviously, but then again, it was Glennon. And then you look at week 4, they shut down the Ravens for most of the game, as much as you can expect in the NFL. So is the defense really that good and that good as of right now, or is it just because they're facing these types of opponents?
I do think it's a culmination of both. I think the most telling game is almost always the most recent game. So Baltimore, I think, is the most important game that they've played this season. And I think that there were times in that game where, specifically in the third quarter, where the Steelers had a chance to put the game away. They missed a field goal, they had a couple of drives that stalled, and the defense did a tremendous job keeping that game within a little safe distance, a couple score lead, especially after that 50-yard run, which was more than half of the rushing yards that the Ravens were able to muster up. They buckled down. They didn't let the Ravens get a lot of momentum off of it, and I think they have been the best side of the ball for the Steelers this season.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, the big thing that they're doing that this defense hasn't done a lot of in the last couple years, they're forcing turnovers. They're getting to the quarterback. It's something that the last couple years, it's almost felt like they've been sitting back and saying, well, let's just keep them out of the end zone, hold them to field goals, and we'll see. But now it looks like they're actually attacking on defense. You got players like Shazier, who's always in the backfield. Tuitt played amazing yesterday. He's kind of an unsung hero. And Cam Hayward, I mean, he doesn't get a lot of attention, but he is a beast.
He's for good reasons, the captain of the defense. He's the most important player on the defense, and he looks as healthy and as effective as he ever has.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to move on to the AFC East, which coming into the season, obviously, it's the same thing that we say every year. That's the AFC East. So the Patriots are going to win, and we'll see who gets second. But this year, with the Patriots defense struggling, right now we have Buffalo 3-1 and looking actually quite impressive so far. We have the Patriots at 2-2. We have the Jets, who I honestly didn't think were going to win a game this year. Maybe one or 2-2 this year. And then we have the Jay Cutler-led Miami Dolphins at 1-2, obviously pending their game against the Buccaneers, which, as of right now, I would think the Buccaneers are probably favored to win that game. But yeah, we have the Dolphins in the cellar at 1-2. But the Patriots are 1-2 at home this year so far. You can say, okay, they were playing Cam Newton and the Panthers, who were starting to look like the team that went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And they also played the Chiefs, who are 3-0, looking to go 4-0 tonight. So is it something that they should really be worried about, or is it something that's like, well, we have Bill Belichick and Tom Brady still, so we're still going to be the class of the league?
I think that the latter is still true, and Tom Brady's still playing as well as we've seen him. But the problem is the same that it was on opening night on the Thursday game against the Chiefs. When your offensive line and your defensive line are both getting outplayed by the other team, especially at home, because they could very easily be 0-3 at home. It took an amazing Tom Brady-esque comeback to beat Deshaun Watson and the Texans at home. But like I was saying, offensive and defensive lines, it's where it all starts, and a lot of people forget about that. The Patriots were not able to defend any kind of pass rush above a three-man rush against the Chiefs. And they're going to have to seek out some improvement if they want to have a chance against any of the class of the AFC, especially Denver. I think that if there's any team that's in a position that's not the Chiefs to beat the Patriots right now, it's Denver.
Most definitely. I would completely agree with that. I know coming into the season, we are Steelers fans. So if you're listening, yes, you can hate us for that, but we're trying to be as unbiased as possible. But honestly, yes, the Broncos and the Chiefs are definitely the biggest threats to those guys. I would even say the Texans again. If the Texans had a second run at those guys, with Deshaun Watson getting used to the way he's playing and the way that defense looks, I would say they're probably even higher than the Steelers also in teams that are ready to beat the Patriots. And the NFC, that's a completely different story. Once you get into AFC versus NFC, anything else can happen.
I think it's notable also to mention that how well Buffalo has been able to play against good teams. Buffalo, it's sometimes you're able to look at teams in the first month of the year and think, oh, well, they'll fall off eventually. But I think Buffalo has been able to win games with their defense, win games running the ball. Tyrod Taylor hasn't turned the ball over, and they've beaten Denver and Atlanta. Yeah. I mean, that's notable. They could be a playoff team.
We were talking about how we were like, Denver is ready to beat the Patriots. We were talking about how Kansas City ready to beat the Patriots. Atlanta probably ready to go up against the Patriots. But the Bills beat two of those teams, and they play the Patriots twice. So we're definitely going to get to see that. And I'm hoping they're good games. I'm hoping it's not what's happened several other times when the Bills are looking good or when the Jets with Mark Sanchez looked good, which seems like an anomaly now to say.
Right.
But they always went up against the Patriots, and the Patriots usually always just came out of that game looking fire. And it's scary because we know that's going to happen sooner rather than later this season, and we'll just have to see how it goes. The AFC South, which honestly right now is such an interesting division. We have the Jaguars, the Texans, and the Titans all at 2-2, and the Colts are 1-3. I want to talk about Andrew Luck a little bit. Obviously, he hasn't played in a long time. This team is being led by Jacoby Brissett. They just don't look good at all, and it's scary because for a long time, at least for my lifetime, it's been there's the AFC South, there's the Colts, and then there's whoever else is there. But now there's everybody else, and then there's the Colts trying to figure out who they are. It's scary.
It seems to me like there's been a lot of miscommunication between head coach, quarterback, offensive line. Other than their game against the Cleveland Browns in Week 3, they've struggled to be able to really muster up any effective drives that weren't orchestrated by long pound the ball into the offensive line, run the ball. And that's just not going to get the job done against the kind of teams you're playing against in the AFC with the quick strike ability of some of those quarterbacks. If Luck is able to come back mid-season, you could see the Colts have a little bit of a resurgence, especially because they don't have one of the tougher schedules in the AFC, But there's something about that team that just seems like the organization may be ready for some turnover.
It really does, because even last year you could start to feel it a little bit how a weaker Houston Texans team won that division at 9-7 last year, and you saw the Colts, who really didn't lose much from the year before, and their defense needs a lot of changes. Their offense, they have T.Y. Hilton, they have Frank Gore, who's still a pretty marketable player in the NFL. It's just not enough, especially when you look at that offensive line and you just see how many holes there are in it. It's not enough to compete anymore. It was before, it's not now. And then you look at the Titans, who many people were expecting to be the class of this division this year. They were expecting Marcus Mariota to come in and finally have a breakout season after only 2 years, obviously, but he's going to have that breakout season. They're saying it's finally going to be another good Tennessee team since Chris Johnson was down there and doing his thing. We also have the Texans, who have had one of the best defenses in the NFL in the last 4 or 5 years, obviously led by J.J. Watt, but there's so much more that goes into that defense. And now that they have this dynamic offense with Lamar Miller, with Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and so many other lower-name players that step up in these times in which it looks like that's what you need in the NFL now. You need players to come out of the woodworks to make big plays for you, even if it's 1 play a game, 2 plays a game. And then we have the Jaguars, who right now are at the top of that division. I have a hard time believing they're going to stay there. They've played well, but they've also been back and forth. You look at all their games you saw last week. They blew out the Ravens. They won 44-7. I'm not too good at math, so I'm not going to try that and embarrass myself. And then you look at what happened yesterday, and they lose to a team like the Jets in overtime, whether it's away or not. I mean, you won by 44 in London. That's pretty away. And then, so you can't really bring that into consideration. And you lose to a Jets team who, coming into the season, should have been the worst team in the league. And right now, I'm not so sure.
I think the most interesting team in the division is Houston, especially because of Deshaun Watson. It's a nice story after the hurricane efforts. What J.J. Watt did, it's an incredible thing what he did. I read a stat yesterday that in the last 62 games that the Texans have played, they're 29-33. 29-33 with the kind of quarterbacks that they've had. Can you only imagine what the Texans would be like had they drafted Aaron Rodgers in 2005? It's a scary thought. Houston is one of those organizations that's been so well run since the expansion that they came into the league in the early 2000s. Personally, right now, the way it stands, I feel like they're going to be the team that may end up winning that division. I wouldn't turn on Tennessee too quick because they have a good defense and they have a lot of playmakers on offense too. And Mariota, while he has yet to really break out, he hasn't necessarily lost his efficiency rating that was pretty identical between his first and second years in the league. Jacksonville, it's a very much a wait-and-see game with them. Like you said, they played very well against the Ravens team in London that we're really not sure what else we're getting out of them. It seems to be their pretty face value. Blake Bortles has been a lot better taking care of the ball.
Yeah, I think that's one of the huge parts. But like you said, the Texans are definitely the story of this division. And Deshaun Watson, they're 2-2. Deshaun Watson is 2-1. And his loss is against Tom Brady being Tom Brady. So he's gotten that starting job week 2. He's thrown for, at this point, 811 yards, 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Very, marketable numbers, decent numbers. And obviously the thing I like to look at is the passer rating, 91.7. That's, for a rookie in his first 3 games, it's as good as you can hope. If you hope for more than that, you're just crazy. You also look at the thing that you said, J.J. Watt being a nice guy and doing everything he did for the Hurricane survivors. Deshaun Watson, I don't know if you saw last week what he did with his first game check that he ever got. He gave it to 3 workers for the Texans. It's just, this team is doing all the right things right now, whether it be on the field, off the field. And they're doing really good on the field, which makes everything off the field look even better. So I'm happy that we get to talk about good things in the NFL. There's going to be bad things that we might have to talk about the rest of the season, but just talking about something as good as this, J.J. Watt and Deshaun Watson, great guys, great football players, and that organization is doing all the right things right now. Now the AFC West, which could be also a very scary division in the NFL, they are probably, I think, the best division in the AFC, and I think them, apart from the NFC South, could be fighting for the best division in football right now. Kansas City, 3-0 pending their game tonight. Denver, 3-1 with that amazing defense that we've seen. Oakland is 2-2, which Oakland was expected to run away with this division this year after how good they played last year. Derek Carr being Derek Carr, getting Marshawn Lynch and actually having a running game, set this year. And then you have the LA Chargers at 0-4. Chiefs being the last undefeated team in the league. I think they're the best in the NFL right now.
I think it's highly likely that the AFC West has 3 playoff teams come the new year. I think that while Denver has been very impressive, as we've mentioned, with the defense, it's going to be difficult to maintain efficient play on offense unless Trevor Siemian can do so. And he has yet to really prove that he can be a playoff quarterback. So it's very much a wait-and-see game with them. But the other top teams we mentioned, the Raiders are a playoff team. Regardless of how they start, Derek Carr is one of the top quarterbacks in the AFC. Some of the things that he can do with the passing game, find Crabtree and find Amari Cooper is incredible. And there is very much little dispute. They're the only undefeated team left, the Kansas City Chiefs. You would have to anoint them, as we stand right now, as the best team in the NFL.
You also look at their wins. Go into Foxborough opening night and beat the Patriots. Not only beat the Patriots, but handsomely beat the Patriots. And you look at the fact that they have their own quarterback controversy. So it's not like they came into the season 100% on Alex Smith, and he has just come in and just shown up. People call him a game manager, says he just does dink and dunk things. He's been going to Kareem Hunt. He's been going to Tyreek Hill. He's been going to Travis Kelce. But remember, 2 years ago, he didn't throw a touchdown to a wide receiver 2 years ago. He threw them all to Travis Kelce or Jamal Charles or Spencer Ware. But now you look at it, and he is spreading the ball out well. And that defense has always been scary. You look at this team, a team that was very close to going to the AFC Championship last year. They played the Steelers. We watched that game, obviously, and that was a close game. And that was a close game with a team that didn't have Kareem Hunt, that Travis Kelce was not 100% in that game. It's a scary thing to think about how long it took them last year to get on track. They were the scariest team going into the playoffs, and the Steelers were able to, hold them off. But this year, they're starting right back where they left off in the regular season last year, and they are the class of the league. The Chargers, we're going to talk about the whole LA thing after we talk about the Rams again. Like you said already, it's hard for them. They are close, so they have the same fan base. But I think the problem with the Chargers when it comes to selling tickets is that fan base was very upset at them. So even though they have the same fan base, how many of those fans are so pissed off that they don't want to take that? It's 2 hours. That's it. That's the same distance from here to where I live at home in Johnstown. And there's so many people that would want to go to a Steelers game. There's people that come from way more miles away to go to Steelers games. Why wouldn't people want to drive 2 miles and some even closer because they're not all in the city of San Diego? Even closer to, well, that's because they were mad. You're leaving, that's like if saying the Steelers have gone to Columbus. Are you going to be a Columbus Steelers fan? Not right away. Exactly. I mean, I would be pissed off. I wouldn't know who to root for at that point. I would be pissed off. So we'll see. I mean, it also doesn't help that they're 0-4. And they weren't a team that was a perennial playoff team anyway. So underperformance, and the wound is still really fresh for fans. I think that's probably the biggest reason that the Chargers are having trouble selling tickets. And we'll talk about the Rams later, and I have a completely different reason. And I don't know if you have any other reasons for the Chargers and the Rams. I'll let you talk for a little bit. I know I'm kind of shutting you out here, but that's what I thought about the Chargers tickets.
No, I do agree on the Chargers. I think that you said it best when you said the wound is very fresh. And no matter what, the Chargers are not – it's not like the Rams where they were an LA team that went to St. Louis. The Chargers were the San Diego Chargers in the AFL. They've been there for a very long time, playing in Qualcomm Stadium for a very long time. To see Antonio Gates with Los Angeles written across his shirt does not come fondly to a lot of people that are longtime fans.
You also see the fact that even in that division, it's not like saying, well, yeah, they were 2 hours away, but that means there had to have been Chargers fans in LA, right? Raiders fans. You look at that, and I was watching, and I know this is going to sound really weird bringing this into it. I was watching First Take probably 5 months ago, and Ice Cube was on there, and they were like, you going to be a Chargers or a Rams fan? He said, no, and I don't care if the Raiders are leaving, because Los Angeles is a Raiders town. And just because you bring two teams in, just because you send the Raiders to Las Vegas, that doesn't mean we're automatically going to go for the hometown team. We've been Raiders fans since the 70s and 80s. It's going to take a while for them to get a good amount of attendance in those stadiums, especially since right now they're still in a college stadium as well. Chargers Stadium is a very nice facility, obviously. It's not an NFL stadium.
It's worth noting, like you said, the Raiders in the 80s became the culture of sports in Los Angeles. The Raiders were as big as the Lakers in the 70s were. You have to pay attention to the fact that fans are loyal and fans aren't all stupid. Some of them can be. Some of them can act that way. But just because you leave a town, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's not still going to be their team.
All right, well, we've talked a lot about the AFC. Now it's time to switch gears and go into the NFC, and we're going to go the same way we did North, East, South, and West. Why? Because I don't like the whole North, East. Yeah, you know how it is.
Right.
So we're going to go with the NFC North first. The standings right now are the Detroit Lions 3-1, tied with the Packers, who are also 3-1. The Vikes are 2-2, and then there's the Bears, who should be 0-4. I'm not going to get into that because I'll go on for 45 minutes, and you guys are all going to turn the podcast off. But the Bears are 1-3 in last place. The Lions and the Packers are 3-1. The Packers are obviously always going to be a threat. It's Aaron Rodgers, and as Stephen A. Smith, who I love watching, I'm a huge Stephen A. fan. As he always says, Aaron Rodgers is a bad man, and he still is. Doesn't matter who he's thrown to. He's dangerous. And Matt Stafford is getting pretty good. Not getting pretty good. He's always been pretty good, but he shows out, and his team is 3-1 right now.
I think the best defense in the division is probably still Detroit. And Minnesota has a very good defense, and that's why they've been able to win a couple games this year. But you look at that Week 4 matchup. Detroit goes into Minnesota and just finds a way to win. You know, Matthew Stafford didn't light up the world, didn't have 5 touchdowns. But that proved a lot to me. I think that game, even with Sam Bradford in that game, I'm not sure if Detroit doesn't find a way to win. They've got a really good, gritty team with 2 good running backs. Stafford's got more weapons to throw to and to get the ball to than Aaron Rodgers does. And as of right now, probably has a better offensive line. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Detroit find a way to win that division. But like you said, Aaron Rodgers is going to find a way to get in the playoffs, and he's going to find a way to make noise.
He always finds a way. We looked at last year. He had 3 Hail Marys at the end of the game? You don't know how he does it. I don't know how he does it. But you look at this division also. If Minnesota wants to have a chance, they got to get Sam Bradford back. This is a division that for the past couple years, and actually probably for a lot longer than a couple, the division champion has been because of a good quarterback. It's been a while since it's been you can run the ball and win the NFC North. And
Rex Grossman was the last quarterback
Rex
to do
Grossman
that.
and the Bears. And you look at the Bears, they're a running team, obviously. Jordan Howard is their team. They lost Alshon Jeffrey to the Eagles. You look at the Vikings. They have Stephon Diggs. They have Thielen, who's also really good. They have a good receiving core. But Case Keenum's not the guy to get them that division title.
And it'll be that much more difficult now that Dalvin Cook's injured.
Especially since Dalvin Cook's injured. Now, if you had Bradford, Cook in there with those receivers, this team is definitely right up there with the Packers and Lions. But I think just because of those 2 injuries, they're a step back, and they need to get those guys back on the field healthy to give themselves a chance to make the playoffs. Because even though it's really hard for them to win the division, they have a chance at the playoffs. But there are also a lot of teams in the NFC that are on that bubble right now. And I look at the Lions and Matt Stafford. He doesn't have to play lights out because he does have a good defense. The Packers do have a good defense. But you also look at those 2 teams, how you said the Vikings and the Bears don't have a pass game. Packers really haven't had a run game in a long time. And the Lions haven't had one either. So it's really reliant on the quarterback and the receiver play, and also the defensive play. But that's how gritty the NFC North has always been. And like you said, Lions have probably the best defense. I agree with that. The Vikings, I think, have the best secondary, probably in almost all of football right now. But they need to get a little bit bigger at linebacker and a little bit better at defensive line before you can get a little bit higher in the overall. The NFC East, always interesting. Always storylines. We got the Eagles at 3-1. The Skins at 2-1. They have a game tonight, obviously. We've said that several times. The Cowboys at 2-2. And the Giants at 0-4. Probably the most Hollywood division in all of football, as in they are always first, second, third on ESPN, on any talk show that are sports. We're one of the few people we like to branch out. We put them down at the bottom of the talk show. That's mainly because that's just the way I typed it, guys. I didn't plan that. But the Giants we talked about, they're really bad. I don't think we really need to talk about them much more. We don't need to pile on them. The Eagles, back to our fantasy draft, because we're in the same fantasy league, and you are kicking ass, by the way. And I am not. So we'll put it that way. But the Eagles, back at the fantasy draft, I know I looked at you, and you completely agreed with me when I said this. And actually, I think you said you were going to tell me this before we even started. Carson Wentz looks like he's going to have a damn good season, and he's done pretty good so far. I mean, right now, 1,058 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 picks, and a 90.5 rating. That's pretty good.
The way I look at Carson Wentz right now is, if Ben Roethlisberger retired at the end of this season, the best replacement in the world for him on the Steelers offense would be Carson Wentz. I think they played very similar games, very similar build.
Oh, and they highlighted that last year. Trust me, when we played the Eagles, it was, Carson Wentz is the next Ben Roethlisberger. And I know me and you were both like, he's big. He's got a good arm. He can move a little bit. I don't know. But now it's been a year, and it looks very similar to what Ben looked like young.
It's Wentzylvania.
Oh, God.
No, but the
Jesus.
The Eagles improved in almost every aspect on the field this year. You mentioned they got Alshon Jeffrey. Their defensive line's way better. I think they do have a legitimate chance to win that division. I know the Cowboys are the most talented team, but if they can find a way to make plays in the passing game and get some... I know they probably are one of the least talented backfields as far as having a whole lot of running back production, especially with the Darren Sproles injury after the season. But if they can find a way to run the ball effectively late in games, this is a team that can make the playoffs.
And obviously we know they have a kicker who's got a boot. 61 yards. I mean, the kid made a lot of money on that just because Carson Wentz believed in him and said, I'll give him my game check for today if he kicks this field goal. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I didn't get to see it live, but I saw the update that said 61-yard walk-off field goal. And I was just like, oh, that's cool. And then I saw by a rookie, and I was like, that's awesome. But like I said, I know we have 2 teams in Los Angeles, but this is definitely the Hollywood division, mainly because of the Cowboys. Everything that happened with Zeke, everything that happened with Zeke before the season, and week 2 with the Broncos, everybody yelling at him for stopping or walking off the field on one play. I'm not going to get on the guy for that. There's been times, both of us played high school football, so obviously we know football. I know I was not that good at football, so if you can take whatever I say, whatever you want. I tried every down because I had to, but a guy at that level, you want to say that he should stay on the field and give it his all 100% of the time. But once you start getting paid that much money, you got to feel like there's motivation that is lacking everywhere in the league.
The man is top 5 in jersey sales in the NFL for the last 18 months. If you had any questions about who he is, there it is, you know?
Yeah, but between him, Dak, and Dez, that is just... I mean, Dak's not... I shouldn't even say that. Dak is not the type of person off the field that should get those headlines. But the way he plays on the field, you would think. He is brash, bold, and carries himself with confidence. And there's people that don't like seeing that in anybody, let alone a rookie/sophomore quarterback.
I think they're by far the most exciting and most easy to talk about team in the NFL.
Oh, they're America's team.
When they're
which
playing,
I hate saying because I'm a Steelers fan.
But it's true because when they're playing well, everybody wants to see it. And when they're playing poorly, no matter how poorly it is, everybody wants to watch them lose.
Mm-hmm. There was a couple years ago with Romo in there that they were losing. My uncle's a Cowboys fan. They were horrible that year. And I couldn't stop watching. I would, if there wasn't a Steelers game on, there would be a Cowboys game on. Not because my uncle was a Cowboys fan, just because I wanted to see them fail. And not even that I hated Tony Romo. It's the Cowboys. And especially since we're Steelers fan.
Right.
Like, there hasn't been a big rivalry. Last year there was the great game, obviously. But there hasn't been that big rivalry field between the Steelers and the Cowboys on the field in a long time. But the way you're brought up in Pittsburgh or in surrounding areas of Pittsburgh, you hate the Cowboys just because of that history in the Super Bowls, just because of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. You hated each other. Was it the 70s or the 80s that the Steelers were there for championships?
That was the 70s.
The 70s.
Yes.
And then it was the 90s for the Cowboys.
And
They're
I think
teams that defined decades. You're going to learn to hate them.
Right, and I think the thing about the Cowboys is they always were that team that was a little more flashy. Staubach thrown to Pearson, and the Steelers are always the gritty. All their fans
Frank
get out of the
Bell.
steel mills.
Mm-hmm.
But the Cowboys' success has come from devoting themselves to building an offensive line and getting a running back who's the best power back in the NFL, probably the best power back since young Adrian Peterson. They do it right, even if they're in headlines for the right or wrong reasons. On the field, they're playing well.
And it comes from the top down. Jerry Jones. The man got into the Pro Football Hall of Fame this year. And some people look at that and they're like, why did that jackass get in, huh? And you look at what he's done. Not only built that mecca of football that is AT&T Stadium down there, but on the field, you saw how he's the GM down there. He has constructed this, and he has constructed so many winning teams. You can't discount anything he's done, and he's Hollywood as well.
He is the most Hollywood persona probably in the entire NFL, but he knows how to build a team, like you said.
Yeah, he really deserved getting into the Hall of Fame, and that hurts to say from deep, deep down. But we've talked about them a lot. Let's keep moving on to what I think, honestly, right now, the best division in sports. NFC South. 4 solid teams, bar none. 4 solid quarterbacks, bar none. Atlanta Falcons, 3-1. Carolina Panthers, 3-1. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2-1. And New Orleans Saints, 2-2. But at the same time, you look at the Saints, they had a really slow start. The last 2 weeks have been fire. Shut out the Dolphins this week. Whether it's Jay Cutler or not, you're shutting out an NFL team. And you look at the Falcons' offense, and you say maybe they're underperforming. Like I said, my fantasy team is trash right now. Due in part that Matt Ryan is my quarterback, and Julio Jones is my receiver. Now, they've been good. Julio hasn't scored a touchdown all year. So, I don't know. But you look at the Falcons. They lost their first game yesterday to a good Bills team. But they've also been very good in the first 3 weeks, almost losing to the Bears in week 1. Kind of scared you, but at the same time, it's the NFL. Any given Sunday, any team can win. You look at the Panthers winning in Foxborough. There's something that's still, even though they've done it twice, they've lost twice in Foxborough. When you beat the Patriots in Foxborough, you're turning a lot of heads.
Right.
Well, because that doesn't happen very often. And you look at the Buccaneers, Winston is a very good quarterback. Mike Evans is a very good receiver. And that is a very good young team, especially on defense.
Right.
Their defense is very underrated, but is one of the best defenses in the NFC. So what are your thoughts on this division that could possibly send 3 teams, the NFC's so many bubble teams, they could have 3 teams on the bubble there. What are your thoughts on this division?
It's like you said, it might be the best division in sports, and it's the best quarterback division that I can really remember since I started watching football. You're talking about, from top to bottom, the reigning MVP and runner-up in the Super Bowl, the year before's reigning MVP and runner-up in the Super Bowl, Heisman Trophy winner, Super Bowl MVP, Hall of Famer. You could have 4 Hall of Famers in this division for all we know, and I think Jameis Winston is a couple pieces away from going to the Super Bowl in a few years as well. I do think the class of the division is Carolina because of their defense. The best playmakers in the division are in Atlanta, specifically Julio Jones. It's a toss-up. That division is...
Anybody can win that division.
And New Orleans is probably would be considered to be most likely to finish fourth in that division. But like you said, they could win 9 games, 10 games would be on the bubble.
But especially when these guys go head-to-head.
Right.
When these guys go head-to-head, I love watching it. And this year when Atlanta plays Carolina, or when Atlanta plays Tampa Bay, even when the Saints play Atlanta, or anybody plays anybody, I know I'm going to be one of the guys that's going to have that on a TV stuck there.
It's like a fantasy football dream when you watch these games because everybody's going to be scoring and everybody's going to be scoring fast. I do think it's the most exciting division, and mainly in part because of the quarterbacks.
Well, now let's wrap it up with the NFC West. We'll wrap up the division portion with the NFC West. Rams are 3-1. Seahawks are 2-2. Cardinals are 3-2. And the Niners are 0-4. So right now the Rams are in first place, and we have a friend who was very excited about this. Bud. They're 3-1. Jared Goff is leading them to, as of right now, 25% of the way to a division title. And we are over-exaggerating right now because our friend loves to over-exaggerate about the Rams. Our friend Dom is who we're talking about if you're one of our friends and listening to this. And I wasn't with you guys yesterday, but you said it was Dom Hall of Fame on the Rams.
There was a lot of excitement, and I can see why. There's very few things that are as exciting as something that is new and something that is fun. It's like that when you meet new friends, and it's like that when you got new young players on a football team. They have a young quarterback who's been playing just as well as Carson Wentz, because I know the entire last season that I watched, I was telling Dom every day they should have drafted Carson Wentz. But Jared Goff, he's played incredibly well. He's been efficient, only 1 interception. Todd Gurley, that sophomore slump is over. He looks like one of the top 5 running backs in the NFL again. They have Aaron Donald on defense, who is the poster boy, but the defense as a whole, they shut down the Cowboys when they had to. They fell behind by 10 points, and they found a way to come back and win.
They got Sammy Watkins, too, at the beginning of this year. And sure, Sammy Watkins didn't do as well as everybody expected him to in Buffalo, but so far in L.A., seems like a pretty good fit.
He's still a mid-20s guy that's got some of the biggest and best hands in the NFL. If he can stay healthy, he's got Pro Bowl potential, too. I think that, and I caught myself saying St. Louis. I think that Los Angeles is the kind of team that can really make some noise in the next couple of years of playoff football. In the West, I think it's interesting because you're talking about Seattle as easy the number 1 pick in that division because they have the best quarterback and they have the best defense. That offensive line has been atrocious. It's been maybe not the worst in the NFL, but it might be the worst in the NFL.
And you also look at Seattle's receivers. They've always found a way to get it done with kind of like not top-tier names. But now they have Paul Richardson, obviously, there, who's stepping up now, but they lost Jermaine Kearse. I was one of Russell Wilson's favorite targets. And I know they have their tight end Wilson up there that he, obviously Wilson to Wilson connection with the Wilson ball. Somebody tweeted that last night and said, I'm going to have really bad dreams about that. I thought that was funny. But Seattle and LA, I think, are the 2 teams that are going to, throughout the rest of the season, probably going to compete. Arizona, it's tough to say because they're a team that has not been, they have not had bad seasons. But I think their 2-2 comes with an asterisk because they have not played well. They won in overtime against the Niners. I mean, I guess the Niners have come close with all of these teams, but you look at, they came close with the Rams. Rams excuse, they're young. Came close with the Seahawks. Seahawks excuse, they had a slow start. Come close with the Cardinals. Cardinals excuse, we don't have David Johnson. But at the same time, David Johnson wouldn't have played defense against Brian Hoyer-led Niners.
That's right. And I think that we've talked already about San Francisco, knew everything there. New coach, new general manager. Hopefully for their sake, new quarterback coming soon.
Yeah.
Yes, they're competing. And they're always going to have a big fan base, a big drawing. San Francisco is their home. But like you said, Arizona was very stagnant offensively against the Niners defense. It's probably worse than the Dallas defense that Arizona lit up the week before. Arizona, to me, just looks like one of those teams, and Phillip Rivers and Carson Palmer have always been those 2 guys where they could be 80 years old, but they're still going to make some really rookie-esque bad throws. They're going to turn the ball over, and there's not much else you can get out of them.
There are definitely 2 guys that everybody keeps looking at the clock and saying, wow, they're still in the league, and they're still producing. How long is this going to last? Now, I know there's questions about that with everybody, but if you look at them, they're the same age range. Those guys are the same age range as Ben Roethlisberger. Nobody's really looked at Ben Roethlisberger's production and said, well, when's he gonna taper off? Has to be soon here, because he still puts up those numbers. You look at Tom Brady, who's older than everybody, basically.
Every player in the league other than a kicker is younger than Tom Brady.
Yes, and Tom Brady, weeks 2 and 3, was AFC Offensive Player of the Week. He has thrown no interceptions. Again, he threw, 2, I think, last year, and he's thrown 10 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Quite honestly,
in the last 3 weeks, he's thrown 10 touchdowns because he didn't have one in week 1.
He's probably the MVP of the league, and he's in his 40s right now for the first quarter of the year.
It's a scary thing to look at.
I think the NFC West, we talked about the South being very marketable. The NFC West is very much not marketable. It's the AFC North of the NFC. Mm-hmm. And to me, I still think Seattle finds a way to pull it out. I think Seattle finds a way to probably get themselves in the NFC Championship game because of the kind of defense they have, and they have a franchise quarterback. But it's going to take some time. And it's the same thing as the offensive line struggles in New England. If they can find a way to figure it out, maybe go to a more zone-based blocking scheme, maybe run the ball a little bit more effectively. Because you have to take it with a grain of salt when they're beating up on teams like the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah. Like I said, Jared Goff playing a lot better. He played 6 games last year. He started 6 games last year, and it was the last 6 games. I think what they did last year was actually good for him, even though he went 0-6. Not everybody was calling for his job. They were saying he's a young quarterback. He's getting used to the system. Well, this year, he's used to the system. He has a new coach in Sean McVay, who has done well with him, and they're giving McVay a lot of credit for the way he's done with this offense. I think Goff deserves, obviously, a lot of credit. At the end of last year, after 6 games, he had a 60 rating. That is abysmal. But you look at this year, numbers, almost as many. I think he's 17 yards short of what he got in 6 games in the first 4 this year. 1,072 yards. He has 7 touchdowns, only thrown 1 pick in 4 weeks, and has a 112.2 rating. He doubled his rating. I guess you can say, he still has 2 games, but he has to do very poorly to get anywhere close to what his rating was at the end of last year.
And he did these things in Dallas.
These are good teams.
Big, important games, and you can say maybe the Cowboys' weakness is their defense, but when you walk into Jerry World that you got to score points. There's a lot of pressure there. He came from behind and won a game.
He came in and scored 35. And like you said, come from behind, too. It's a hard thing to do. And there's obviously people that are saying, he would definitely not be the number 1 pick now. No, maybe not. I think he'd still be a top 10.
From what he has shown?
As of right now, yeah, Carson Wentz looks like he's the better of the two right now. You've seen a season. And you've seen a season where Goff didn't get the start. Goff played the last 6 games under a coach that knew he was getting fired. There wasn't much to care about in LA last year when he came in. And now he's come in. There's still not a lot to care about because their attendance is abysmal. They're not expected to do anything. And he's performing. And that was my genius segue that was actually not that good into the attendance for LA. Like I said, for the Chargers, it's because there's people that are probably still have a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth. These guys came from St. Louis. There were no St. Louis Rams fans in LA. There might have been a couple. They're all Raiders fans or Chargers fans a couple years ago. There were not really any Rams fans left. So you have to rebuild that. You don't have fans from St. Louis going to the games. So you have basically no fan base to start with. No stadium to start with. And last year they had no on-field expectations to look at. I would expect there to not be people showing up in the stands. If you would have asked me, and we would live in L.A., God forbid, the two of us in L.A., do you want to go to a Rams game? I would have probably said, I'd rather go to the beach. And they're going to fight that. They're going to continue to fight that. But if they start performing better, I think they could build a fan base, especially with, I know we've said already, it's going to be hard to compete and get Raiders fans to root for the Rams. They're in different conferences. I could see some Raiders fans saying, hey, I could pick up a second team. Now, I'm not a Raiders fan. I don't know how diehard, because you see those games at the OC Coliseum.
It's a different breed of fan,
for
sure, at least in Oakland.
It is some weird, misshapen, formed NFL college fan made together that is diehard to the bone. And we see diehard fans everywhere. But diehard means a lot of different things in a lot of different places. A diehard Raiders fan is a lot different than a diehard Steelers fan. Both obviously love their team a lot. But that understanding of who is your team, can you have a second team? That's something that I can't speak to, and nobody really can speak to unless they're not a fan of the NFL. Right. And hardly can you find somebody that's not a fan of the NFL talking about the NFL. So it's not really something you can talk about.
I think the two best points that you made, one, anybody that's not a passionate football fan or a passionate Rams fan or their opponent that they're playing, hey, you want to go to the Rams game tomorrow? No, I live in Los Angeles. There's plenty to do. That's always going to be a problem. I'm a diehard football fan. That would be my response half the time. And, of course, the biggest reason, it's the Raiders community over there. It's a Raiders city if you're talking about football. In the fall, there's still people watching the Raiders, and I can't speak about personal experiences. I have not been to Los Angeles, but that's my understanding.
I've been there once, and I've seen Raiders stuff, but that's small sample size.
Right.
So those are the divisions as of right now. It's only been 4 weeks. We're speculating way too much already. Obviously, we're saying, oh, there's so many playoff bubble teams in the NFC. Some of these teams could lose the next 4 times, and by the next time we come on podcast, we could be looking at them saying, wow, they're worse than the Giants. It's too early to speculate for playoffs or anything. There's a couple more storylines that we want to talk about before, you're done getting annoyed by us for the week. Outstanding performers so far. My top 4 right now are Kareem Hunt, Stephon Diggs in Minnesota, or Tom Terrific, however way you want to put it, Tom Brady, and I think Todd Gurley. Is there anybody else that you think I am thinking of too highly, or that you don't think I'm not thinking of highly enough? What are your top performers as of right now?
I think it's difficult to not look at, as far as position groups, the Denver defensive backfield, because they ate alive Dak Prescott in week 2. That was the easiest one to look at, but they just find a way to make plays as if they are an offense. With Harris and with Aqib Talib. I think it's also notable to look at the young quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson especially. And I think you're also looking at a lot of young players that are kind of stepping into their homes in the AFC. You mentioned Kareem Hunt. The Steelers defense, being a Steelers fan might sound a little biased. T.J. Watt, Anthony Chickillo, Ryan Shazier, these guys look like Pro Bowlers. And that's not something you always see from young linebackers against good teams like the AFC has. So I think a lot of attention to focus on those young guys on defense, because it's a really tough thing to learn early on. But they've done a good job.
All right, now we're going to talk about one more thing before we wrap it up. And it's something that everybody's talking about. And personally, I don't like to talk about politics, and now at this point, I know you're all shutting off the podcast. It's going to be the national anthem protests, obviously. It all started with Kaepernick. It was escalated very highly when President Trump talked about it. Most of the time, week 3 was the big time where most of it was highlighted. The Steelers, obviously, very close to home, were one of the biggest storylines. What are your thoughts on the national anthem protest? We'll each give our personal thoughts.
Well, I personally think that Colin Kaepernick's decision to kneel for the national anthem is a different reason than a lot of players have to kneel for the national anthem. Oh, yes, it's definitely more. And I think that as of now, it is just as much about President Trump's comments as it is anything else. And I think a lot of players feel victimized because they're from a much smaller community with much less money than President Trump has, and they're seeing this as an opportunity to say, hey, I'm in the public eye, I have money, I have power, I have media, I want to do something better. I want to show my family, I want to show young people that it's okay to stand up to oppression, which many of these people feel that they're oppressed. I think it's an interesting thing to think about, where if every player in the NFL knelt before a football game because they felt like military veterans were coming back home from war and were not treated fairly, were not given jobs, were not given compensation or mental treatment when they needed it, I really find it unlikely that President Trump would have a problem with that. So I think if the players that are kneeling and taking a stance because of what's happening in Washington, then I think maybe it's just a little bit of a skew as far as who is seeing what and who is feeling what. But that's the best thing I can provide.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. It seems like from where it started, this is a completely different issue that we're talking about than we were a year and a half ago. You really need to take into effect and look at what the players individually are thinking. And you look at what happened with the Steelers, everything with Alejandro Villanueva. And he's even upset that there were pictures posted of him opposing his own head coach. And he hates that. It's what you're kneeling for now. They're not opposing the flag. They're not opposing the military. What they're opposing is the thought of oppression and the thought of racial injustice, which is a problem that the United States has had for a very long time. And I hate to say this, but it's probably still going to be a problem for a very long time to come. So it's something that I felt like we had to talk about. It's something that obviously was one of the biggest headlines in the NFL in the first quarter of the season. So it's something that I'm happy we did get to discuss. For the following weeks, we're going to try to do this podcast probably every 4 weeks. It all depends on now there's 17 weeks in the season, whether or not we're going to have an extra break or week break in between some of the other ones. Initially, we wanted to do this once a week, but neither of us have the time or energy to go through this once a week. So we're hoping to get another one of these out maybe after week 8, possibly week 9. Tonight, obviously, we're both going to probably watch Kansas City and the Redskins. I'm kind of excited for that game. Watching Kareem Hunt has been fun all year, and watching Kirk Cousins has been fun for the past couple of years. So you can follow Nicholas Poprocki at
NickPoprocky at Nick Poprocki on Twitter.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Nick Berlansky. That's NickBrlansky. You can follow our page at Steel City Spiel on Twitter. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.